Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Responsibility Revolution, the place where we stop pointing fingers, reclaim our power, and remember who we truly are. And today's guest is a woman who embodies that truth in every cell of her being, Beth Harkins. At 78 years young, and you know I love about the wise woman, she's proof that wisdom doesn't fade with age, it amplifies. She's traveled to more than 67 countries. Some of us have never gotten out of our own backyard. She stood under mango trees with women reclaiming their voice and built a life that's less about slowing down and more about rising up. Beth calls what she teaches forgotten power. And she's going to tell us about that. So stay tuned. This is going to be really amazing. That sacred current that runs through every one of us, waiting to be remembered. And in this wild world that's obsessed with youth, she's here, as you know I am, to remind us that age is not a limitation. It's an asset. So if you've ever wondered whether your best years are behind you, or if it's too late to write your book, change your story, or just start again, this conversation is going to light you up, because Beth is living proof that the second act just might be, or your third act, or your fourth act. It just might be your most powerful one yet. So welcome, Beth. I'm so excited to explore what's magic we're going to have today. And I always start my podcast by asking you where you are in life today, because we'll jump into all the valleys and the dragons in just a moment. But tell the audience, where is Beth today? What are you doing to share magic on the planet?
Oh, Debbie, how wonderful. What a fun conversation. And as you say, let's create magic. So I love to be a part of that. Well, I'll tell you, I'm here in the universe. I'm a citizen of the universe, and I am actually situated this moment in a condo near downtown Dallas, Texas. And my identity that I have stepped into in the last numbers of years, I might never, ever have imagined. And it's one of the most values and energetically aligned places that I have ever found myself. And that is after publishing an award-winning novel at age 76 that only took me more than 2 decades because I stood in my own way about too much perfectionism and self-doubt. And hey, who am I to be a writer? Although I was holding, like so many women, these fabulous stories that are so important to share. And I was bold enough at that age that I had an opportunity, and that brought me to where I am this moment, to speak to a Zoom audience of 500 women. And it was asked what was a vision I had. And I said, well, I'm just publishing this book, The Possibility of Everywhere, and I would love to go on a global book tour. And do you know that from that, I had an invitation to travel a global stages speaking about my book. And it was an incredible opportunity. And it then led to what was even more unimaginable, which was the opportunity to become a transformational book mentor. And that's what I am doing now. And I could just speak on and on about that, but
yeah, we're gonna unpack this. So, first of all, I don't say this very often, but I want to be you when I grow up, because there's not many people that are as robust at this age, right? We're in this beautiful wisdom stage of our lives. And so I want to talk about, first of all, that you are this transformational mentor for people that want to write a book, because I can't even tell you how many people, and I know you hear this all the time, women especially want to write their books, and we hold it inside of ourselves and we don't let it out. So the first thing I want to share before we even get into this conversation is that you have a little gift on your website. And I'm going to put all this in the show notes, but it talks about what are the 7 steps to get that going. I want you to share about that just for a moment, because we'll share some other information as we go along. But before we even get into this, you have a way for women or people in general to start moving forward, because what you just said is so vital for every woman to hear. Is you just made a declaration. You're on a Zoom meeting. You said, this is what I want. And then the universe just started conspiring, rearranging everything. And that's how it showed up. But it starts with that one little step. So what's this one little 7 steps that share about that? And then we'll go on to getting some unpacking of where you've been and how
Oh,
you got
great.
to
This
there.
feels fun. And I will say that I'm talking about something that applies very much to writers, but we are all authors of our lives. So we're always authoring the next chapter. And if it's about writing a book or doing some other creative project or just finding meaning and purpose, it's that. And so really I have 3 keys that are a part of my signature system. And the most important one is to identify the why. What is the why? What is that is motivating us, or that sometimes it's stuck inside of us, or we can't access it, but it wakes us up at night. It's something that we, at this point in our lives, in the second half of life, whatever that means, we come to know from our life experiences. We know a truth, and that's our why. And it took me a while to identify that exactly, but I can tell you that I work with clients, some of whom they immediately know what that is. They just immediately know. So that's the first. And that why is that so that you can take a step in the direction of what it is that you most want to do. So that's magic key, magic. Oh, can I do a little sidestep here in that it just reminds me before we get to key number 2, when I said the word magic, I just looked up the root of the word magic and the root of that word magic means capable, power to. Now, look how far it came when it became something very different, magic associated with witchcraft and women being burned at the stake or something. But anyway, so the second key, the second piece of magic is now we know a why, and so that you can move forward. And then the second one is what has been holding you back up until now? All of the barriers, the mindsets, and staying in the wrong frequency, staying up here in the head all of the time, not letting the heart connect. And I know, Debbie, you're all about this, and I feel so strongly about it too, that we must start from the heart, and you can call it embodied, but you move inward. And this is not easy for women because while it's innate to us, we have forgotten this power, and we rely too much on our heads quite often, and we move away from. So second one is to bring awareness to these barriers, mindsets, and old stories that have stood in our way. And then the third step, and we can expand them into 7, but the 3 real keys here are then you need to own or discover a map, some level of structure to get you where you're going. Because yes, you're flowing down the river, but there have to be some banks to that river, or you're all over the place. And so that's the third, so that you can actually get to the end. And I like to say, so that you go from struggling to write, or just dreaming of it, or thinking about it, to getting words on a page, to the end that I say is a beginning. And so you can hold a book in your hand with your name on the cover. And I got to do that one time. And you've done that as well, Debbie, so you know what that's like. So those are the 3 keys that I could go on about forever, but that is just a little talking too fast nugget.
And honestly, that holding of your own book, there is nothing like it. And I'm sure you felt that same way before you actually published your book, that you watched other people on stage or in any other format and say, I should have that. And so I just love this idea. It really is something as simple as going on Beth's website clicking on that to take a step towards it, because we'll talk about some other steps as we go through this podcast. But I wanted to share that we're going to start out with some action that people can take, because somebody could listen to a podcast and go, oh, that's all great information. But if you don't start moving and doing something, it is about the embodiment for sure. I talk about that all the time, but it also is about moving in a forward direction to,
Oh,
to,
thank you,
um,
thank
to
you.
implement this. And so I want to talk about the idea of forgotten power, because this is the overriding messaging that you talk about in this book. And one of the things I love so much on the cover of the book, because you're in Dallas, I'm in Texas, and Oklahoma City's right next door. So you say the possibility of everywhere from Casablanca, some people have watched the movie, to Oklahoma City. First of all, that is, to me, that's just precious, because this is how you expand your mind, is begin to think about things on your micro level and your macro level. So how did you even come up with that phrase in there? And let's tie that into this forgotten power, because that book is
Oh, okay.
yes, it's a portal. I love it that you've created this idea and this place for somebody to step into their forgotten power. So let's talk about what forgotten power is, and then tell me about how you came up with that line on there, because I just find that priceless.
Okay. And then there's two more words that go to it, and also from Kathmandu to Timbuktu. Yeah,
Okay, well, we'll
that's
talk about
another.
that, but I love the
We
idea
won't
because
skip ahead. Let's do that. Let's do right what you said.
yeah.
Okay. And forgotten power connected to Casablanca to Oklahoma City. Forgotten power are all of those things. You know, I used to talk about feminine power, even the sacred feminine. But today I'm much more looking at the broader, and it very much has to do with that word action. On the one side, we have forgotten how to move within, as I said, how to find flow, direction, our innate guidance that helps a bird know how to fly, or that guides us along our path. We've forgotten that. And then we have also forgotten the ways that we can take action that aren't just pushing us to total exhaustion. And so we've either known what I would consider, I don't care for it, I can't come up with better words than feminine and masculine, but I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about values, and I'm talking about energies and principles. Yeah. So on the one hand, we have this one kind, okay, feminine for lack of a better word, which still to many means weak. So they don't like to think of that. But we have that kind of inner power, the power to, the power with, and it's a power within that needs to move outward. And again, so much to say about that, and I won't go into too much, but so we have that, and we've forgotten aspects of that. And then we also have, and if I wanted to call that then the authentic feminine, there's also the non-toxic, authentic masculine. And they're both sacred, the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine. And you need that for the action, to take the steps. Yep. Don't be stuck. Don't just sit there and think about it. And so we have to do both. So let me invite you to come with me to Casablanca to illustrate something that happened to me. I was 5 years old. So imagine yourself at age 5. Everyone has a story about this age that they remember. I happen to have been living in Casablanca, Morocco. I wasn't a part of the movie, but it wasn't too long after that, because I am a part of the leading edge of the baby boomer generation. So 1946. Okay. But so, and I, in front of a white stucco house with a banana tree, I used to play with my Moroccan friend, Batna. And I had heard stories. My mother had told me stories about Queen Cleopatra. And I also saw a Time magazine article about the newly crowned young, if you can imagine, very young then, Queen Elizabeth. My name is Beth, but it's really Elizabeth. So Queen. And this idea that I saw her with the crown and earrings, that's what I wanted. That's how I would find my power. And Vatna had earrings, but I didn't. And even though she spoke Arabic and I spoke English, we spoke girl talk. And do you know, one day she showed up with a needle, a thread, and some beads. And I sat on the ground, and before I knew it, there was a thread hanging out of my ear. I could reach up and touch it. There were beads hanging out. And I didn't wait for the other ear. I wanted to run in and tell my mother exactly what had
Oh.
happened. And when my mother saw this sturdy string and beads hanging out, of course, she screamed, Beth, germs, Botna, her ears will get infected. And she went for her sewing scissors and snipped the strings, and my power from the bead fell to the ground like it was buried in the earth. I lost my sense of power but not easily, because I stomped my feet and I yelled, damn, 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 the words that I had heard nice little girls don't use.
5, right? You're 5 years old.
Yeah. And so anyway, so there it was, that this power was slipping away. And then I was told by a loving mother who was helping me to conform to the world where the women wear the beads and put the hat on and go to church on Sundays. She wanted me to straighten up and be sweet and nice and go play with my dolls. And then I felt a kind of shame that I had dreamt of these huge dreams of doing important things in the world. That's what I wanted. And so I thought, well, when Daddy comes home, he will look at me, and even if I don't have earrings, he will say how wonderful I am.
Mm.
But Daddy must have had some really important things on his mind that day, because when he came in, he sat down in his chair and he hid behind the newspaper.
Mm.
And that's when I felt myself shamed and silenced. And it took a long time to get that journey that then took me to Oklahoma City and then took me many places and many times around the world. And there's so many other stories, but that story opens the book, and it is an autobiographical novel. And so there are some names changed, but it is the truth of my life, absolutely the truth of my life. And that's not the important part. It's the truth of so many women's lives. You don't have
Yes.
to have had your ears pierced in Morocco.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that because first of all, you were in Casablanca before you went to Oklahoma City, which most of the people, well, not most, but a lot of people listening would be the other way. So that is such a priceless story. I used to go to a feminine movement studio. The woman, Sheila Kelly, she calls it for women our first offense. So it could be just somebody shaming you, whether it be a neighbor's mother, our own mother, about something that we did, much like what you just shared. And it's so important for every woman to begin to unlock her story, because that's what that is. And that story followed you, I'm sure, for a number of years until you just change the story. We are the writer, producer, and director and the screen of our
I love,
lives. And so
I
just
love
really seeing that, I could almost taste this little girl that was so excited. And even at 5 years old, you knew your power that moment, but it got quashed. We all have a story that was quashed. So, where did you go then as your life unfolded to become the brilliance that you are in this moment? Because I always say it's our hero's journey, and sometimes we had multiple of them, right? We had a dragon, or we have a lion, tiger, and a bear. But it's so important to know that on the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talks about, it's those opportunities, right? Those are portals to becoming who we are. So share some of those beautiful dragons that you experienced in your life so that everybody knows. You went from 5 years old, you didn't go to 78 years old having this amazing book. There's a
Right,
transition in there. Tell us a
right.
little bit about what your journey was like.
Okay, I will. And then I will sidestep just for a second to say also very much respect the hero's journey. Maureen Murdoch has written The Heroine's Journey, and I use that a lot in working providing the structure for women to creating their books, because one important distinction, she knew Joseph Campbell and they spoke together, and she said, I think
Mhm.
that there is something. He said, well, no, it's the same. That's the human journey. But she said, I think there is something distinct with the heroine's journey. And what she said is the journey begins when we let go, abandon the feminine. And that would
Mhm.
be that silencing. And my story, as I told you, it wasn't a story of abuse. Mine was milder, but and I'm not comparing it to much more
Mhm.
horrific stories, but it had an effect on me,
Absolutely.
particularly. because my father was very emotionally disconnected.
Mhm.
And that is something I have later researched that really can have a profound effect on children.
Mhm.
Okay, but let's fast forward and let me take you now. And I'm not, so there was a bit of a dip of that inciting incident. And yes, there's other things, but before I want to share this, that I want to ask you to come back at my age in early 50s. And it would be the first time I was back in Africa, ironically. However, this time, instead of being by a banana tree, this is a story that happened near a wild mango tree. And it's in a very rural, isolated, subsistence level village in Kenya. And at that time, in my pursuit to find jobs that would pay me to travel, I had earlier been a Pan American flight attendant, and there's a whole bunch to tell about that with my hat. And I was a
Exactly.
feminine flight attendant with Pan Am with white gloves, and we had to wait before we got on the airplane. Okay, but now back after that, with a lot of travel and the ups and downs of life, I arrive and I have this job where I get to lead women to remote parts of the world to see what's happening with women in these areas. And as I sat in the shade of this mango tree, I had discovered that shade had been denied to women who were told that there were snakes there. And so it was too dangerous. But these women arrived in a circle holding their snake sticks. They had no fear. And one by one, they stood to say their names. I was so moved. And when it came time for the last woman, obviously in the second part of life, anyway, she looked down to the ground with her age-lined face, and I didn't think she would be able to stand. And then I felt this incredible energy of the group that was supporting her, and I felt it inside of me. And I could tear up just remembering the power of that moment. And then I looked over at that woman, and she not only felt that power that began to lift her, but she stood. And when
Mhm.
I heard her announce, and I heard these syllables, Cecilia Ariambo,
Mhm.
her name, and it echoed out like an African drum beat. And so
Mhm.
anything that had been challenging for me up to that moment, it all just sort of disappeared because I thought, this is what I stand for. Our voices being released despite limitations. But what I didn't fully understand right then, that is what kept me sometimes still not fully claiming this forgotten power. I forgot to name the action she took. She didn't just feel that energy, which is so important. That's the first, you got to feel it, but she acted on it. She didn't just sit there and smile. She stood up in
Yeah.
front of strangers with a different color skin, my freckled skin, and she declared her name. And I mean, it just, that was then. And now I realized that it was the action as well as the feeling that was so essential. And had I gotten all that together right in that moment, it would have been different. And I don't want to take too long at this story, but let me just say quickly that then the big crash came in that I really thought, oh, I'll continue taking these trips and we will go and I will raise awareness of women. We'll raise some funds for these women. We won't do work for them, they'll do for themselves. And I was so excited. I was a part of a non-governmental organization. And I went back and thought my boss would sing my praises. And instead, he said, Beth, I think this work you're doing with women is kind of a distraction and that your brand is taking away from our brand, which nobody except a lot of aging men knew about their brand. But at any rate,
Yeah.
at that moment, all I knew to do, because I didn't have the acting of the other type of power altogether right then, all I knew to do was run to the bathroom and cry. And
Mhm.
I was so crushed. Now, this was my passion, my dream, my identity. It was everything to me. And fortunately, I had a very supportive husband. And in the book, you can find out what happened next. But that moment might not sound as horrific and traumatic as things that some people have lived in their life. But I know many women who something that takes away their identity, their passion is so crushing that it doesn't really matter what caused it. It's our own limitation as to what the reaction that we're going to take. And
Yeah.
I'll leave you with that.
I
for a
love
moment.
that so much because it has so many layers to it. And when we talk about taking action, it doesn't have to be massive action. I've been in enough Tony Robbins seminars, massive action, massive action. That's great. It's not a bad
Yeah.
thing, but it's also leaves people out of the conversation of this beautiful woman that was standing under that tree, and her action was standing and saying her name. That's it. But that had so much profound impact on you and all of the women under that tree, number one. And then the other component is we as women, as you said, it doesn't matter if the actual experience is different. It's those feelings of having, particularly because we have all grown up for the last 2000 years, we've gotten the masculine playbook. It says, this is how you do it. And then we've put men, unfortunately, in this hierarchical position that when they say, especially in a corporate environment, this is not going to be okay, this is not what you're going to do, or even fire you, we take that personally for a moment. Now, it may take a while to be over it or to move through it, but I think it's important for women to hear that no matter what anybody says, man or woman, or says something to you that you know is not your authentic self, that we may have learned over periods of our lives to run in the bathroom and cry. Been there, done that, cried at board meetings, in C-suites. But the fact is that when we get to understand who we are less likely to run away and more likely to stand up and say our name. As simple as that. So I think these messages that you have and you've experienced are not just about the experiences themselves, but about the feelings that you have that you now allow women to read about in a book so that they too can be encouraged and empowered, because that's really what this amounts to, is that your story is going to activate somebody else's desire to move forward, because we all got the masculine playbook, we're operating out of it, but then there's too much action, which is called drive and hustle. So it's really finding the balance of those with the feminine energy, which is the intuition, the connection, the communication, the flow, being with each other in community. So it makes all the difference in the world to blend that feminine energy into the space. So I want to take a moment and just share about the book particularly and how people can get a copy of it either through your website or someplace else. I want you to talk about your book specifically for a few minutes, just so people understand that this is not just a book. This is literally a transformative manuscript that can lead somebody down a path.
Well, the book is easy to find to order from any retailer, from Amazon, on my website, which is my name, BethHarkins.com. It can be in the notes. Don't worry about the spelling. Yeah, don't worry about it. But there it shows a link. And it's about my book, and yet also really at the same time, writing a book has come to me to be, our stories matter. And how we tell our stories to ourselves and others, it shapes our lives, and it ripples out to shape the world. And this is true for men and for women. I have a fabulous 15-year-old grandson, so I'm equally concerned about the empowerment of men to claim the authentic power. And so I dedicated my book to my grandson. So I love talking to women, and I love mentoring women to write their books. And I had women in mind when I was writing mine to a great extent, but it's to say to all of us to value our life experiences, our tragedies, our difficulties. So in my book, I go from that young girl who is there wanting the earrings, and then comes back and then when she wants to comes back to Oklahoma City. She was born there, but doesn't really remember. Her name is Cindy in the book, but Beth didn't really remember living in Oklahoma City, of all places, when I came back. And I still was struggling to think maybe I was brilliant. I had wonders about that, but my mother told me I was very smart. And because I started talking when I was 2 and I never shut up. But anyway, one of the stories then becomes about going to the elementary school, and the principal, I still can see that linoleum floor with the dots on it. And this woman's there that scared me to be sitting there. And she suggested that I go back to first grade because for, I don't know why, but go back to first grade. And I was so, again, it's just another one of these to give you a small example of something that isn't the worst thing that ever happened to someone, but became a shaping thing to me.
Yeah.
I reacted very naturally by putting my thumb in my mouth and sucking my thumb. I wasn't going to get to go to second grade. So anyway, it's these kinds of little old stories that then you will continue on my life. You will continue to read more about what happened after I got back from Kenya. And I had already had an earlier trip to Nepal, hiking and taking some women to hike in Nepal. So these magnificent experiences were happening, and now the door felt closed. And so what did I have to do? Run away. I couldn't confront, even to ask a question. I had to leave because I had to leave the job. I was horrified that I was leaving behind the women that were in support of what we were doing. I was embarrassed. And so when my husband said, what if we just both left our jobs and we took off and get in our Ford Explorer, sell one car, sell everything we have, and take off around the country? And do you know that you can read about that story? Because I had traveled at this time so many countries around the world, but a lot of my own, and I couldn't do it without a purpose. But this was beginning to claim a purpose because I'm not just a wanderer, I'm a seeker. So, and always for a reason. I thought I could do that. I will interview women off the back roads of the country. We won't go on any interstates. We'll stay off the grid. And then there was one other little thing that would have to happen. We could go for a few weeks and stay in nice hotels, but if we were going to stay for 6 months, we were going to have to camp. Now, we were both city slickers, and everyone that knew us was sure we had totally lost our minds. We went to Kmart before they closed, and we bought a tent and some plastic tubs. We sold our house, and in 2 weeks, I'm telling you way too much about my book, but in 2 weeks, we set out. I told my employer I was leaving, and he was jealous because he wanted to do the same thing, but he didn't have the courage to. I did. I didn't have the courage. I was going to find it, but I was determined to go find it. And so 6 months, 30 states, 30,000 miles, and many stories later, we came back.
Oh my gosh.
And there's lots more to the book, but I don't mind sharing that after 46 years of marriage to a wonderful, supportive husband, and he would get on my nerves, and I got on his, but some way or another, he loved me. And then 11 years ago, he died. And so that's the time of life of stepping into a truly new identity. We made it back from that long trip, and we had some more years together and some other moves and this kind of thing. But in the moment of that kind of death, a person's old identity leaves. And it can be a divorce, although divorces are not quite the same as the death of a spouse, but there's many things that create this kind of loss. And when that happens, a mother who loses a child, the sense of identity, and then people don't really know exactly what to say to you, their friends disappear. So there was a lot of coming back from that. And this is when I went back to writing to kind of make sense and get my stories there together. And it wasn't about so much just if it's a just, but the death of my husband, but it was about what you create on the other side of a big loss.
Yeah.
And that's the remainder then of that book.
There's so much in there because people tell me all the time that when I ask them what do they want with the abundance that they create, I want to travel. And it's so fascinating because, as you said, you traveled with a purpose. Some people just want to be a wanderer, or they just think they want to travel. And I think it's so poignant to know that you were traveling extensively, and then there was this moment that it came crashing down. And you, once again, there was another transition. You had to regroup yourself and had a beautiful partner, thank goodness, that brought that to you again to travel in a different way. I just took a road trip across the middle of America, did a little
Oh,
camping. So for 6 months, I don't know. That was brave. That was brave.
oh, it was.
And yet all of this, there's these seasons of our lives that
Mhm.
we can get so stuck in the down. Life isn't linear. It doesn't go straight across or up or anything. It's how we deal with these challenging times or perceived challenging times as opportunities that really grow who we are as humans. And so for anybody that's out there thinking, I don't want to write a book necessarily, writing in and of itself, telling your story is so cathartic because all of these stories are inside of you. And it's amazing when I write in a journal that you can get your feelings out because the feelings don't live up here, they live in here. And so just to allow that catharsis of, especially after a lifelong partner's death, that is really a transitional moment. And yet here you are in a new version of you. It doesn't mean you don't love that previous version, but she is something incredible. And so I want to talk about manifestation for a second, because what happened was when you wrote that book and you're on this podcast with 500 people and say, what do you want to do? I want to go on an international book tour. Like some people go, well, okay, how did she manifest that literally? And really, it's making that declaration number one. We always have to take the first step. But it's so, I love the story about when you did go on your international tour and what the biggest conversation was. So share about how you started the tour and the thing that people would say over and over, because I'm not going to give it away. I want you to share it.
Oh, thank you for asking that, Debbie. You're a great podcast host. I'm loving being here with you. Let me just say that the first stop was to go to the Netherlands, to a wonderful small town outside of Amsterdam. And someone who was on that I had only met a couple of times, who was on that video that day, and that it was part of a course I was a part of, hosted this event. And it was just so wonderful. And I won't go into all the details, but I will ever forever be appreciative of her. And when I stood up and started talking about my book, and then when I finished and I had books, I ended up donating proceeds to a cause that they were supporting. But at any rate, I was autographing for the first time in my life, signing these books. And the thing they were most interested in was my age.
Crazy.
That was it. I
Love
thought
that story.
all about my story. It was, no, you're, how old are you?
Yeah.
That was the whole conversation. So it's kind of like, I just saw that an 80-year-old woman did the Ironman or this
Yeah.
marathon run,
Right.
swim thing. And that's incredible. And that she must have taken action and flow or somehow. But mine was just getting on an airplane and getting there with my book. And yet I inspired, and that made me. I mean, I could have said, who am I to autograph this
Yes.
book? Oh, and Debbie, one person said, I so enjoyed this, but I had never heard of you before. I thought, well, most of the world hadn't. But anyway, I realized signing that I was just reflecting back
Mm.
that I appreciated their being there to listen
Yeah.
and that wanting my book. So
Yeah.
long answer.
When you told me that story about that they were so enamored by the fact that you were that age, and that really is a testament to there is no age expiration date. It's only what we tell ourselves. And it's so beautiful to hear a story like that, because that is because you were traveling internationally. So that's just not a conversation that's going on in the Western Hemisphere. That is a conversation that's going on the planet for women that are so inspired by somebody that can be that model for them, that it will represent their lives going forward. I'm sure you have no idea, and you have left a legacy. You have no idea how many people you've touched just by being present and saying or doing this whole experience. To me, it's just, I love it because it is such an inspiration. That is the thing that when I first talked to you, is the inspiration that you exude for other women is so powerful. It can't even be measured. And I know I will hear your name in infamy even though that lady didn't hear you at that time, because it's really important. So I want to talk about how that now turns into not only you are a living example, but mentoring the young women of today. Because I I don't ever worry about people, because I know that we're always, it's divine, everything's in the right divine right time and order and all of that. And yet I find that it's important for voices like ours as wise women to speak to the younger women on our planet, because we didn't have the problem of internet, of being constantly bombarded by influencers, because you cannot be your authentic self if you are constantly being influenced by somebody that says, you, in order for you to be okay, you have to do this. So how do you feel that you're mentoring women now, besides teaching them how to write a book? What is your message to women of today of how to be more authentically themselves? Because we could talk about women of our second half, but there's still all of these women that are beginning their lives, and they're very untethered, as far as I can see, to whatever is real in the authenticity of who they are. So what can you share with them? Some
That,
wisdom.
that is a great question. And I will sit with it and also say the simplest thing I know to say right now is that what I know to be is to be me. There was nothing extraordinary about that travel that I did, honestly, because I had traveled a lot. So to get on an airplane to go someplace was not it wasn't as big a deal as it might seem to someone. So there's that, which is just to drive home the point to anyone, any age, but especially to younger women, that who you are is enough.
Mhm.
It's not a matter of trying to prove. If I had tried to prove that I could do that instead of it sort of happening from a belief that it could,
Yeah,
that would never have happened. So
right.
that is I suppose what I would have to say is
Yeah.
how can we walk through this life, through the challenges, through the difficult, very difficult, chaotic, disruptive time in which we are living that feels different from I feel there was a great deal of innocence for all the problems that we had. They were buried. Maybe it's our shadow that we're looking at now in the world,
Mhm.
but whatever, that's a whole different conversation. I would say that we have to be strong in who strong and tender, fierce and tender about who we
Mhm.
are and be ourselves. So I can show up with my wrinkles, my imperfections, all of that, and that's just who it is. That's who I am.
Yeah.
So I don't have to stand there with a billboard of a message. You can find out more about me and you read a book if you want to. You can sign up and I will be a book coach if you have a desire to write a book, or if you just want to think about how to create a next time in your life. But as far as walking through this world and running into people and speaking to them, I can just be me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not really clear on, I know we grew up when at a time where we were told how we should be. So I don't know that influencers are really any different than that. We should grow up, we should get married, we should have children, we should buy a house, we should, in a lot of cases, we should get a job. So there has always been some imprinting, if you will.
Yeah.
And yet there was this place that it felt a little bit safer. I don't know, maybe I'm projecting, a little bit safer to be authentic, because really at the end of the day what you've just shared is being yourself is being authentic, and I think that's what the world is craving right now, is the authenticity of who
Yeah.
it is that we see out in our world. Because social media, I call it internet because it's so many different layers of it, we're watching people on a constant basis that, I am sorry, I don't feel that they are being their authentic selves. And I believe that the world is resonating with authenticity. It's wanting more of that. So
Mm.
if that message can be delivered to somebody that's listening, and they're just even having that glimpse of, I want to be more of me. I'm tired of being somebody else. And because these things are just reflections of our own inner thoughts, but seeing a bullying situation, well, how do you deal with that? How do you get to be a person that's being bullied stand in your power. And I've seen people go through those things and come out so much stronger as a result of it. So nothing, all of the things that you've shared, you've said a couple of times, they weren't the most dramatic thing. And I don't think that's important. Our experiences are not the key. It's the feelings that we have and take away that disempower who we truly are, that we have to say, no, that's not the truth of who I am. And then really understand who we are. If you were to be standing at your own eulogy many, many, many decades from now,
Yeah. I
what
thought
would
of it.
you like? What would you love to hear somebody say about your life? What is the legacy that you believe that you are here to leave with this place called planet Earth?
Uh-huh. Well, I have thought about that. And I wrote some things down because I have a fabulous daughter and son-in-law and grandson. And I wrote some things down. First of all, I said, I want to have a party. I love
Mhm.
parties and I want a celebration. And I wish I could recall the exact words that I put down that were carefully thought out with some great quotes that are leaving me at just this moment. But it's to live fully the best we can fully. No other person can say to us what it means to live fully. I would love for someone just to say that. I don't care, most people that would show up, whoever is left to show up for that for me or whatever, they're going to know that I took a lot of trips. I went to India 4 times in the last 6 years or something, but that's not what matters. It's much more, I would wish to be remembered for the transformational journey that is inward as well as outward. And the inward part is what I hope I reflect in the living of my life. So it's not about certain accomplishments or whatever, or the things I might not have accomplished that could have crossed my mind in life, but the best that we can, that we, through the difficulties and the challenges of life, that we just live fully. And it's so trite to say each day, each moment, but it does kind of boil down to that.
Yeah.
So I honestly, despite what I wrote down and have forgotten, that's probably not what was going to be spoken anyway. I just
Mhm.
hope that they say she laughed a lot and they
Yeah.
saw me cry
Mhm.
and that both have value.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there are plenty of other people that would share about how you impacted their lives, of how you were generous, of how you were loving, of how you were kind, because that's the energy that I
Yeah.
get from you after speaking to you. I mean, does it mean you're doing it every single day? Not necessarily, but the fact is that,
Well, yeah, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. I like it. I'll take it. I'll take it. But they'll tell funny stories about me. They'll
of
tell
course.
about the before we had fobs, how many times I locked the keys in the car and all kinds of places. So many absent-minded, funny stories. They'll tell funny stories because that's also what makes our lives. Those
Oh,
things we did that
absolutely.
were far from perfect and that
Mhm.
were embarrassing at the time, and I'll let them relive those because I have a feeling that's what will be said is to remember because people say, oh yeah, yeah, I know she did that kind of
Okay,
thing.
so
So that
that's gonna
matters.
I didn't know have this question on anything that I've got
Oh
here.
dear.
I love that though. Tell me the funniest story that you would tell at your eulogy if you were in charge of the stories that
Oh
was
no.
crazy, that was embarrassing, just one good one, because that's really the essence of what you're talking about. And I know you probably have a ton on the tip of your tongue.
I know this won't be the best because the best ones will be what somebody else tells because they would see it
Right.
from their
From their
perspective.
perspective.
Oh, oh, yeah. Well, this is what came to my mind for whatever it is. There were more
Okay.
embarrassing ones, but I did not know until long after my husband died that going back before those things that cover the gas cap of the car, now they have a little attachment onto it that they didn't used to have. I did
Yeah.
not know, and this will be funny to people who know me, or if they knew my husband, this will be funny because that's her for sure. I did not realize that my husband kept extra things that go over the cap
The gas
because
cap. Yeah.
Yeah, he would go out every once in a while and open up. Oh, she did it again. And he would just screw another one on, and he never told me. Now, what's the ironic
Mm.
in that? And that was with older cars back then. Anyway, the thing is, what was the grand point of that story? But it's just how we do have to be resourced by others. We can't, and
Mhm.
I thought of myself as the most independent. I wanted to
Oh,
do things my way. I traveled alone. I did all these things. I was so independent. And little did
yeah.
I know. And it's not about it being a husband, but it's just about the idea that there's
Mhm.
somebody, like I said, that's going to have your back a little bit. And we have
Yeah.
to be able to resource that from many different
Right.
people. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until someone at the bank, because I never went to the bank, but he would go into the bank. The person at the bank knew that story about me, that my
Oh
husband kept
gosh,
the thing in. So silly
that's so
story, not
sweet.
the funniest, but it came to my mind.
It's so cute, but you know what? It's so, as you said, it's about resourcing other people, but that is receivership because we as
Yeah, to be
women
able.
do everything for everybody. And that's what I talk about when I talk about abundance is it's our receivers are broken. We can't accept the help and the good. So I love that as a story to wind this up that you were able to receive because you were what so many women are in that mindset. I'm independent. I can do this on my own. And the fact is we can't be on this planet by ourselves. It's a community project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And certainly
So
writing is not a solo journey either. None of it is a solo journey. We can live alone. I'm not talking about that, but it's not a solo journey.
no, it's not. So I want to remind everybody your website, I'll be in the show notes, but bethharkins.com. Get that 7 steps because that is going to be the first step. I always encourage people, just like we've been talking about this whole time, take action, one tiny small step to get yourself moving forward. And if you have the desire to have a coach or a mentor, Beth is absolutely brilliant for this because I know you're going to pull it out of them. It's going to ooze out like fine wine or honey. So I'm excited about that for sharing this story. And once again, I said I want to be you when I grow up because I'm
Oh,
now deciding I'm gonna do an international book tour. I don't know when that's going to happen exactly, but it's been such
well,
a
I feel that.
delight and such a pleasure. And I want to end by asking you if there's one thing that you would share with a woman that was your younger self, that now your older self, your future self. What would it have been that maybe would have made an impact or just given her comfort?
Mm, yeah. Just don't judge yourself so harshly. Self-judgment does not get us anywhere. And it sounds very simple to say, just love yourself more, but I think that's what it is, not being so self-critical and feeling that you always have to be trying to please some
Mhm.
unknown entity out there or some, something.
Yeah.
Pleasing ourselves is not selfish. We have
Yeah.
to do that first before we can offer anything to anyone else.
Yeah. Well, ladies, that's your message for today. So do it and stay tuned for our next episode. And Beth, thank you so much for being
Oh,
on here
thank
today. I
you.
appreciate it so
So
much.
fun, so fun. Enjoyed every minute.